Hi, John Dickson here from the Centre for Public Christianity. Now, what follows is a talk I was invited to give at a conference for leaders in the fitness industry. I'm well aware of how ironic that must seem. A conference for nerdy historians, no problem. Bunch of musicians, it's imaginable. But a collection of fitness experts, strength trainers and aerobic instructors, that's just stretching plausibility. Especially since the sum total of my physical achievement in life is a bronze medal in under-12 judo championships at Hornsby back in, I think, 1980 or something like that. In fact, I still have the medal here for safekeeping. It reminds me of what could have been. Actually, I think there were 4 of us competing, so bronze isn't that great. But anyway, so nothing I'm going to say here in this little talk is going to help you increase strength or agility. It's not going to make you fitter or faster. But if I'm able to convince you of my little thesis, it might just change your life. Here's the thesis. The greatest people in history, by which I mean the most influential, the most inspiring, have shared one rarely noted quality. They have held their strength, their skill, their intelligence with what the ancient Hebrews called anava, what the ancient Greeks called tapeinos, what in Latin is humilitas. In English, humility. I'm saying that the greatest people in history have held their strength with humility. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive. How can you be great and humble at the same time? But please don't misunderstand me. When I talk about humility, I do not mean humiliation, though in fact the two words are related, as I'll explain in a moment. Nor does humility mean weakness or lack of ambition or low self-esteem. Humility is the noble ability to hold your power, whether physical or intellectual, for the good of others, not for personal gain. Let me say that again. Humility is the noble ability to hold your power for the good of others, not just for personal gain. Now, I want to give you one of my favourite examples of humility, just so you can have a picture of what I'm talking about. There are so many to choose from. In the Eastern tradition, we could talk about Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, who was an Indian prince with enormous wealth and power, great intellect, but he gave it all up and dedicated his life to serving people who were suffering. In the Western tradition, we could talk about Jesus. Whether you believe in religion or not, it's a historical reality that perhaps no other person in history has influenced Western history as much as Jesus. And yet he was the epitome of humility, of holding power for the good of others rather than personal gain.
You're listening to the vodcast for the Centre for Public Christianity. For more great content, why not subscribe at publicchristianity.org.
But really, I want to give you my favourite sporting example. And there are plenty to choose from here as well. I could talk about Roger Federer, who it seems is incapable of either winning or losing without praising his opponent and downplaying his achievement. He's quite extraordinary. But my favourite example of humility comes from last century. Apparently, 3 young lads hopped on a bus in Detroit in the US in the 1930s. And for some reason, they tried to pick a fight with the man at the back of the bus who was just minding his own business. They turned up the heat of the insults. He didn't respond. They turned up the heat even more. He didn't respond. And then this guy stood up. And the young lads realised that he was a lot bigger than they'd estimated from his seated position. He reached into his pocket, this guy, handed the lads his business card, and then hopped off the bus and went on his way. And the 3 lads gathered round the business card to read the words, Joe Louis, professional boxer. Now, for those of you who don't quite know your boxing history, they had just tried to pick a fight with the man who would become heavyweight boxing champion of the world from 1937 to 1949. This is one of the most successful fighters of all time. How lucky were those kids that Lewis was in a good mood and that he was a humble guy. I mean, this is a man, they used to say, could knock out a horse with one blow. I have no idea how you get that reputation, whether he practiced regularly on horses, but that's what they used to say about him. He was a guy who held that power, not just for personal gain, but for the good of others. Now, my thesis is that the greatest people in history, the most influential, the most inspiring, have often been men and women marked by this humility. Now, I'm not saying if you're humble, you will automatically be great. Of course not. Nor am I saying you can't be great without humility. We all know examples of great people who wouldn't know humility if it hit them in the head. My thesis is that humility makes the great even greater. And in the next instalment, I want to try and convince you of this thesis by offering 5 clear reasons for cultivating humility in both personal relationships and professional dealings.